Welcome back to Conscious Construction, the Conscious Enneagram podcast. I'm your host, Abby Robbins, and today I am happy to share a really incredible conversation with Keith Kristich. Keith Kristich is a meditation teacher bringing an inner spiritual approach to teaching and practice. He's the founder of Closer Than Breath, an online inner spiritual community devoted to meditation, centering prayer, and awakening to the divine within. He's also the creator of Daily Mystic, a creative project blending art, poetry, and mystical reflection to help people reimagine the divine and see God everywhere. Keith identifies as a type 9, and throughout this conversation, we explore all things Enneagram, contemplation, spirituality. Keith shares a little bit about his journey from a more evangelical expression of Christianity into what he calls a much more open expression of mysticism. And it's a really incredible conversation. I had such a great time just being with Keith, and you can really feel that in the conversation. Keith's organization, Closer Than Breath, is a really incredible resource for anybody looking for more community in their practices. They have all sorts of different things going on. I have shared there, and I hope to be sharing there again soon. So definitely check them out. And before we dive into the conversation, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us for Enneagram office hours last night. If you're listening to the day it came out, it happened last night. Such a great time, great conversation. I love getting to hang out with y'all. So be sure to sign up. I will have posted the next 3 to 6 months of the event over on my events page on my website, but click the link down below to register or to submit a question that you'd like to have answered in office hours. And if you've missed office hours a couple times, but you want to see what it's about, you can check out the other videos on my YouTube channel. I'm sharing little clips and little snippets of answers and conversations that we've shared, so you can check out what the vibe's like and if you'd like to show up next month. Again, if you're listening on Tuesday when this comes out, we are just a little over a couple weeks away from the deadline to register for the Enneagram Expedition, my year-long closed community cohort, where we're going to dive into all things Enneagram and really apply the wisdom of this tool to our lives. One of the things I said in a podcast many years ago that my wife Danielle actually helped me remember, because most of the time I don't remember things I say on podcasts. I was on Jen Hatmaker's podcast about 5 years ago, and I apparently said, "Stop bedazzling your hammer and build something," in reference to how we engage with the Enneagram. We learn so much about the system, all the ins and outs, and these cool theories and ideas and whatnot, but we never do anything with it. And so this cohort is about doing something with the things that you've learned about yourself and others and the world through the Enneagram. So check out all the details down below. Sign up to register. Registration closes December 18th. And of course, if you're enjoying Conscious Construction, don't forget to leave a rating and a review in your podcast app. If you're watching this over on YouTube, please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share, and hit that notification bell so that you know every time we're putting out a new episode and other great content about the Enneagram and the spiritual journey. And with that, let's dive into the conversation with Keith. All right, welcome back to Conscious Construction, the Conscious Enneagram podcast. I'm your host, Abby Robbins, and today I am here with Keith Kristich. Did I say that correctly?
That's right. Thanks, Abby.
Awesome. Keith, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, I'm here in Buffalo, New York, where it is not yet snowing. I'm a father, husband to my wonderful partner, my wife of, 13 years, I think. We
Wow,
have a
congrats.
3.5. Yeah, married young, grew up in the evangelical world. So
Yeah.
very young, grateful for the person I married because she's wonderful. And so, yeah, husband, father, Enneagram type 9. I do a lot of work within the contemplative, sort of mystical Christian tradition, but also
Mm.
with heavy leanings into the inner spiritual nature of reality, knowing that God or the divine shows up in all cultures and all religions across all time and space. And so we can't get away from her. And yeah, so I think my greatest calling, is to help people see that divine in all things.
Mm. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Well, I met you through the organization that you've created, Closer Than Breath. when I was teaching a part of a 3-month Enneagram series that y'all were doing. Tell us a little bit about Closer Than Breath.
Yeah, well, and you did a fantastic job. We Closer Than Breath is really, really, really Closer Than Breath did start though as it's a pandemic baby, a total
Mm,
mistake. As the pandemic shut things down, I went to Instagram of all places and started to put out contemplative content, for lack of a better word. I am not a social media person, but while we were all there, people were engaging, and so I started to put out all sorts of free meditation courses, centering prayer courses, which is the
mm,
primary meditation practice I teach. And so out of those courses, people loved it. People wanted to stay connected. People wanted accountability for practice. And so we kept putting on courses, monthly contemplation days, which is what you spoke at. And now we're a very robust community, an organization that I didn't even realize it was an organization until it was already in full bloom. And so we do a bunch of annual conferences. We have a contemplative Enneagram summit coming up. We do an annual centering prayer summit in January of 2026. And so we have all these major events, a lot of small events,
mm-hmm,
and weekly supporting meditation and centering prayer groups. And so it's really contemplative community for inner spiritual seekers, very much rooted in the Christian mystical tradition that's
mm-hmm.
often overlooked, but really we have people of all different religious persuasions because we really bring that sort of open mind, open heart approach to the divine. So
That's amazing. I have to know it was kind of a footnote in your your personal intro, but you said it almost jokingly that like you married young because you grew up in the evangelical church, and also growing up in the evangelical church, I know for myself we might say chasm between the evangelical church and this kind of mystical experience of Christianity feels quite vast. And so I'm really curious to hear what it was like for you crossing that bridge, that chasm, that space between this very moralistic, authoritarian, Puritan, perfectionist, et cetera, like
oh yeah.
expression of Christianity to this space where you can say, hey, I'm coming with an open mind, open heart. The divine is expressed in all of these different ways equally, right? There isn't a hierarchy. It's not as if Christianity is at the top and then like the other people get it too, but like only a little bit. It's like, no, it's fully formed in all of these spaces. What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, exciting, liberating, energizing, terrifying. I
Mhm.
mean, hell was at risk. The
Yeah.
eternity of my soul was up for debate, and so there was as
Mm,
liberating as it felt, it was also terrifying.
yeah.
I'm grateful that I did not grow up fundamentalist, and the evangelical world that I grew up in is not the same as the evangelical world that exists now, which in my
Yeah.
mind is far more sinister and with
Mm,
tied up with Christian nationalism in all sorts of ways that we know.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
grew up with a heavenly father that loved me, that loved
Mm,
my ego, that loved my small self. And so that was a very affirming orientation to the world. And so for that, I'm very grateful for that sort of foundation. And yet, always bumping up against the boxes that we put God in, the do's and don'ts, the dogma, the doctrine. And so, yeah, it was really by accident that I fell into contemplative practice and contemplation. I don't know if you know the band Me Without You.
yeah.
um, Wonderful band of inner spiritual seekers, Christians, Jewish. Grew up with a Sufi father, I believe, in a Hasidic Jewish mother, and became Christian. So they bring this inner spiritual, inner religious, musical, lyrical music, and I would use that to pray with because the
Mm,
lyrics were drawn from so many different traditions. And after the songs, things would go silent, and I would just fall into the silence. And I had no idea what to call silence. And I thought, this, I think, is meditation. Is it evangelical? My boxed in self thought meditation equals Buddhism. And so went to the Buddhist library at our evangelical, or went to the evangelical library, the Buddhist section, got out some great books on Buddhism, which was a great help because Buddhists are great at meditation. But I was also invited to a retreat center, Mount Irenaeus in New York State, and was introduced to contemplation, contemplative prayer. And they were talking about union with God and talking about centering prayer. And it was just so liberating to find like what I was experiencing in the silence wasn't necessarily like a mindfulness meditation, but was like this heart forward warmth quality, this heartfulness quality, this union with God. And so sinking into that, having that practice sort of fill me was, I think, a graceful way of entering the deconstruction journey that I think so many of us go through, because the teachings of Thomas Keating and the dismantling of the false self system, it's a
Yeah.
system, just like the Enneagram type is a structure, a type structure. And so on the contemplative path, we dismantle our false self, and we do that in a graceful way rather than so many evangelicals that just like throw away the baby with the bathwater, that just get so angry and that everybody's an
Yeah.
atheist and everybody's pissed. And like there's good reason to do that and be pissed, but there's also a way to do things gracefully, which I think the practice a lot of people
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting, because there is a challenge. I think a lot of people do hit the boxes, right? Hit the edges of the walls that you're talking about without this, like you said, it's almost like a graceful handhold to move through this very painful and terrifying but also liberating experience. Tell me, what was the point that felt most terrifying for you in this space? Like it sounds a little bit like the way you're relaying the story feels almost like, oh well, I had this very like graceful way to move through it, and so it was all hunky-dory. But I'm sure that wasn't actually the case for you and how you lived it. What were the points that felt most terrifying? What was that
do.
moment like for you?
Yeah, those moments still come and go. I mean, the phrase that comes to mind, if you meet the Buddha on the path, kill him, kill the Buddha.
Yeah, yeah.
and and it's like if you meet God, like kill God, because the God of your
Mm,
mind is not the God that is the image. We can, I make this simple art, like imagine an apple in your mind. An apple in your mind is not the same thing as an apple. And
mm,
the image of God that we hold in our beliefs and structures and institutions and the Bibles and the Quran, and it's not the same thing as God itself. And so I continually have those sort of terrifying moments where it's like,
mm,
okay, I'm an atheist again, because my own image and
mm.
understanding of the divine is just crushed and murdered and dead and dying. And that's okay. So those moments still come, and that also comes with liberation.
Yeah.
Um, but I think very early on, probably it felt, hmm, yeah, just eternal damnation. If I were to
Yeah.
let my idea of God die and my eternal salvation is tied up with this belief that I can understand and conceptualize in my head, then am I risking something that will be eternally with me? Or in this case, I'll
Mm,
be eternally without. And so a certain trust to say that there's something greater and more loving than my own understanding, and the limits of that
mm.
belief are limited, and
Yeah.
to let it be.
Man, it's so interesting. I'm talking to a lot of different people this season of the podcast, a lot of different contemplatives and a lot of people who, even you've worked with, and a lot of people who are like not involved in this contemplative space. And this theme of trust keeps coming up when we talk about these journeys that we go on. That like they're for as terrifying as it may be, there is something, there is this ground of being that we are continuing to walk on, that we're just going to trust that it's still there, despite everything else inside of us saying, oh no, don't. Like the foothold is not going to be there. It's not, you're not going to have firm ground. And I just think that's really beautiful. And I love what you're talking about, like if you meet God on the path, kill God. Like I've had lots of conversations with people about, friends even, and just being like, I think maybe you need a bigger God. And it's
Mm.
so interesting to see how quickly we take our ideas of God or of the divine or of contemplation itself. We take our ideas and we become so identified with them, right? The thought that like, oh, we need a bigger, or we need more, or we need to like you said, kill God, can feel so offensive. But at least in my experience, the third or fourth or fifth or 18th time that you do it, you start to realize, oh, this might be the process
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
itself. So I'm kind of curious to ask, what do you feel like what's the most recent God that you've killed?
I hope I don't usually kill God, and maybe it's just a slow suffering of my own understanding. But, hmm, I mean, I can just play with the idea that God is nothing, and
Hmm.
that too needs to die. I mean, one of the early discomforting things was to find that God was not an object, that God is this groundless, grounded being, that God isn't an object outside of myself that I can direct my love to, like I was taught, but
Hmm.
rather that God, if God is love, then God is the love with which I love God with. And so, therefore, anytime I'm in relationship or sending conscious love to someone, Abby, I am experiencing the divine on some level. Whew, that feels good to say I'm always in loving union with God when I love. And yet,
Hmm.
when even God becomes no thing, love included, that love is just a twisted version of my emotional heart. Perhaps love is not God? And so,
Hmm.
how to let whatever understanding and experience flow and let it be without needing to kill it or overanalyze it. I don't know what the most recent death of God would be, but it has something to do with nothingness.
Hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. There is so much in nothing. I think it was Thomas Keating who talked about, God is nothing, but God is no thing and God is nothing. But Thomas Keating talked about how it's more accurate to describe God as is,
Mm-hmm.
and the isness that permeates everything that is. And when you talk about God as nothing, no thing, but God still is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just really, it's a profound shift.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, like most recently, my own favorite kind of name of God is just naked I am.
Mm,
And I just get this image that God is naked. God is naked being. And that we dress God up with language, we dress God up with our experience, we dress God up with Christian theology or yoga philosophy or Sufi Islam, whatever it is, we dress God up. And
mm,
yet we have to just let God be God, let God's being shine and all that is as the isness. Thomas Keating would call God not only is, but then is he,
mhm,
personify it. And that's that great universal and personal. Cynthia Bourgeau's highlighting this a lot, that God is isness itself, which feels very universal, very cosmic, the substance of all that is. And God is Izzy. Her name is Izzy. Their name is Izzy. His name is Izzy. God is personal. And so that
yeah.
does keep that personal dimension, keeps the heart open, which I think some of us, myself included, sometimes lose as we move from a personal religion
Mm,
like evangelical to a more universal, expansive, contemplative, or mystical or non dual orientation. We can sometimes lose that universal or that personal connection. So, how to let God become personal again, to become finite, to become small in a sense, can also be liberating.
yeah. Well, I mean, this is such a beautiful, like, it highlights, like, coming from like an Enneagram perspective, it really does highlight the kind of Trinitarian, or the law of three that we see in the Enneagram, right? Like, we have that first initial thing, right? At the yes point, at the 3 point, we have to move into the no. We have to develop the second force. We have to move away from wherever it was that we started, right? Into its opposite. And that is deeply liberating and deeply powerful. And then the next step is at that 9 point, the transcend and include, right? Like, how are both of these things true and complete in and of themselves, but also expanded by each other, right? To know that God is isness, and that God is this personal, experiential thing that we can actually relate to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's really powerful. Especially we were talking about like the deconstruction and the like the way we can throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a way that moving into this this 9 point and the energy of that of transcend and include, there's a way we can bring both the baby and the bathwater back, right, in
Mm-hmm.
new ways. Okay, this thing that I thought was just absolutely not, actually it is in some new way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that I would hope that that's where the deconstruction movement
Mm-hmm.
is moving. I don't know that it is, but I would hope so, to see more and more people embracing this loving, transcendent kind of energy, right? That doesn't not discriminate about the things of the world, but knows how to hold more than just a singular point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the opposite of transcend and include, transcend and reject, right? Which
Yeah.
so many have done, and we transcend and reject ourselves. Like, we can try to transcend and reject our personality type or our ego. And
Yeah.
so, like, I think that both and spirituality, or that 9 point of the true, not just integration, but a truly new way of being in the world, not just
Mm,
like the weaving of 1 + 2 = 3, but somehow mysteriously it equals something. Things are greater than the sum of their parts.
yeah.
And so, if we get stuck in that duality of the 3 to 6 line of like, do I
Mhm.
believe it or do I not? Do I think it or
Yeah.
do I not? Is it right or is it wrong? And it's like, wait, we're just rearranging our beliefs and our thinking patterns
Yeah.
instead of opening to a different part of our being. And now Cynthia Bourgeau's, one of her most famous lines, something to the effect, it's wisdom is not knowing more, but knowing with more of you.
Ooh.
Not knowing more, but knowing with more of you. Can we get out of the dualism of like, oh, I know this, I know that? It's like there's got to be more of me, awareness, presence, being online to sort of
Mm,
move to that 9 point that can
yeah.
take us to that transcendence that also lifts up with it
Yeah.
the sort of dualism.
Well, and that, I mean, I think that line also just so beautifully illustrates what at least Gurdjieff was trying to communicate through the law of three and through this triangle point, right? That like we can't, if we're stuck in the polarity, if we're stuck between that 3 and 6 point, we can't get to the 9 point. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a third thing, right? The third force, the third energy, an energy outside of where we are, right? In this polarity. And I think knowing with more of yourself is a really beautiful description of what that can look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like we're bringing in something that wasn't there before that allows us to hold more,
Mm-hmm.
to hold both at the same time in this new way. I think it's such a powerful expression and I mean, for me, kind of an inspiration that like, yeah, it's about bringing more of all of this to whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Which that to me is like where the three centers of intelligence or three brains are. It's like we want all three brains online:
Mhm.
brain, mind, heart, body, our moving center, our intellectual center, our heart feeling center. Like, if they're offline, then we're just operating out of 2/3 of our being or 1/3 of our being. And of course, religion and spirit, or religion or doctrine, is totally on the mental level. It's
Yeah.
like, believe this, believe this, believe this. Your heart might be like, ooh, that just doesn't feel right, but I have to believe it because eternity's at stake.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
so much of the deconstruction conversation is just happening in the mind,
Yeah.
and trying to ignore what's happening in the heart that sort of intuits this doesn't feel quite right. And so, by not learning new information for the mind, but rather opening ourselves, like contemplative practice would have us do, mind, body, heart, then we open to
Yeah.
that deeper self.
Yeah, and it's been interesting for me on my journey, at least, and maybe you share something similar. I mean, you do identify as a type 9, right, as this body center type. There are so many things, I say that I deconstructed before it was cool. Like, it was almost 20 years
Mhm.
ago when I was like, wait a second, something is not clicking for me. It was long before there were like Facebook groups or podcasts about it, right? Like I was out there on my own, and so many of the things that didn't make sense, that made sense in my mind, but not in my heart. As I've gone on this journey and really brought my body online in the process, right? Like so much of what we talk about in the mind only makes sense in the heart when we've brought it into the body and when we've lived it out, right? When
Mhm.
we can have an experience. And there are so many things that, like, as I'm continually, living my life, it's like, oh, this is what they meant,
Mhm.
right? Like this is the thing that, like, it's like, some sort of puzzle box where everything lines up, right? When I get the body
Mhm.
involved. And it's like, oh, this was true on a level much deeper than I originally thought, right? But you don't know that until you bring the body into it. Yeah, I'm curious, what does bringing the body into your spirituality looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, two points come to mind. Like one is stillness, which is the easy point for me, which is the ego trap of the type 9. That's
Yeah.
like, oh, sitting in meditation, I can do that. And like sitting in the peace of my bare naked being, I can do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's always peaceful and nice, but there's already like an attraction there. So I think
Yeah.
that's the spiritual ego, the 9 structure to watch
Mhm.
out for,
Yeah.
that we're drawn to this and not to use it as spiritual bypass or that. But
Yeah.
all that to say, that is a legitimate piece of the body, is to practice being
Absolutely.
in the body, the awareness of the mind, the warm presence of the heart, the being of the stillness of our body, that we would take time to feel into things as they are and to know the things that we're talking about
Yeah.
from an experiential level. And so that's a non-negotiable, I think,
Yeah.
for on the spiritual path in general, like some sort of meditation, stillness practice. It is going to look different for everybody in different traditions and different ways of doing it, but it is an essential piece of the puzzle. The harder side for me, and I will blame my personality, the type 9, is being out of touch with the body, is movement. And I
Yeah.
still struggle with movement, is working out. I like is doing yoga. I hate yoga. I love yoga philosophy. Love yoga philosophy. But yoga, like the postures, like, nah, I'll
Mm.
take only 6 of the rungs. And so I think a big piece of that is that movement piece. And so the
Yeah.
plus side for me is dancing, like
Mm.
learning to dance, learning to not care what I look like. And that's been years long battle. I used to hate dancing. I love dancing.
Oh,
Playing with my son, dancing with my son, well, that's super easy. How to use the body and to be playful, to be at ease, to be enjoy. Like happy people dance. Most of the dancers I know, all the dancers I know, like they're happy people anyway. So I
yeah.
think there's something about the body and movement that, like, if stillness brings peace, the flip side, maybe movement brings some joy to the body in a
Mm.
sense. So that's the struggle point, though, I think for
Yeah.
me, is still like, I can do the stillness, but am I willing to do the daily discipline of moving my body in a way that's good for it, instead of reading a nice book or
Yeah.
journaling a little bit more? All of which I love, all of which I will continue to do, but
Absolutely.
it's the low hanging fruit.
Yeah. I think that it's so important for people to hear this, right? That, like, because in our culture, right, in especially in the United States, in the Western world in general, most people, when they think about yoga, think about the postures,
Mhm.
and that's it, right? The the diving into the philosophy, understanding the Yoga Sutras, you know, taking in and digesting the Bhagavad Gita, right? They're like, what? Why? Like, I'm just here for a workout, right? And then to hear your, like, perspective on it is, it's kind of refreshing for me, right? At, like, as somebody who, I mean, I am a yoga therapist. This is the heart and soul of my work, aside from the Enneagram, it's so nice to hear that somebody's like, oh, I'd love to, read more about the philosophy and understand these like deeper meanings. But the movement, I don't know. And I think it's important for people to hear that, like, even people who look like they have their spiritual stuff together. I know I've heard from lots of people, like the withdrawn types in general, right? Nines, fours, fives are like, they're the natural contemplatives, right? They're the very spiritual
Mm.
people. And that may be true on some level, but it just means your work looks different,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't think that there is any larger difference of two types next to each other on the Enneagram than 8 and 9, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that you can get much farther away while still being right next to each other, right? Like,
Yeah.
my tendency is towards the big movement, the sometimes literally the physical movement, like doing hot power yoga and
Mm.
weightlifting and all of these like big powerful movements. And stillness can, and often still does, feel kind of like a torture in some
Yeah.
way, right? Because in stillness I have to feel all the things that movement was distracting me from. But what you're sharing is like, for the 9, it's almost exactly opposite. Like, you've cultivated a space where this stillness and quiet is very comfortable. That might not be the exact right word, but you're familiar enough with it that it flows easier for you.
Mm.
But the movement is the place where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, ooh, your greatest strength is also your weakness in a
Mhm.
sense. And boy, I wish we could swap for a week or so just to like get my body into shape, Abby.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so true. And what you said, like the work is different for different types, and I think that's
Mhm.
so critical for and what one of the gifts of the Enneagram is to recognize that being spiritual for one person for one type might look different than being spiritual for another. And so like just being
Mm.
my own, like another, like similar to this with 9, like I don't want to do podcasts. I don't want to talk in public. I don't want to, like, I'm an introvert already. I'm a contemplative. I don't want to put my face and my words out there.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
also know that like I'm called to bring something here.
Mm.
And so I have to go against, so my inner work is to like actually show up, is
Yeah.
to show up where other people, other types might inner work is to, well, how can I take a step back? Because I
Yeah.
show up a lot. Or I don't know, I'm thinking about like a type 3 that's
Mhm.
always, or certain threes that might just always want to be in the limelight. And it's like, well, how can I take a
Yeah.
step back? That's their work. This work is to show up. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
how do we do that well? And how do we do that with an awareness of the other types and not mistake spirituality for any one thing? And to me, spirituality is akin
Mhm.
to nothingness at this point, that every part of life is spiritual. There's not the spiritual world and the physical world. There's not meditation and prayer isn't my spiritual life, and conversation with my partner is everyday life. It's like those are one and the same thing at this point. And so
Yeah.
how do we just expand what it means to be spiritual, to be so big that it actually is just what it means to be human, and
Mm.
all types are invited into that process. That's the circle that holds us together. And as the types, we got to do a different style of work, as you said. So just highlighting what you already said.
Yeah. Well, and I wanna just, like, I think there is something about, and I know that you know this on some level, but just to make it really explicit for those listening, that showing up, like you talked about, like this being your work, that is the work of the body center,
Mm.
right? Like, the way that we show up in the world, like, that is body center stuff. And people, I think, often I think this is, to do with a lot of our, heavily Puritan evangelical, very Greek rational kind of culture, that like we've split the body and the
Mm.
mind, or the body and the spirit. And so we, in a lot of ways, demean and limit what the body center is actually about.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the body center is literally about physical movement. Absolutely. I'm not saying that it's not, but that's not the only piece of it, right? The way that we show up to our life is absolutely body centered work, right? Like that is moving center. And you you showing up on this podcast is stepping into this center you don't like as much, right? That is part of this work. And I think we do a disservice to ourselves and to the system in general when we really pigeonhole the body center as just about the physicality and the movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are ways in which our physicality literally brings us to our life, and we
Mm-hmm.
can't access our life without it.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Beautiful. I mean, that felt therapeutic for you to say that when you're saying showing up is work of the body center. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
good. And that also for me is where like practice comes into place, like the stillness point. That like
Mm.
on one end of the spectrum, it's about movement, and on the other spectrum, it's just about something way more primordial, like way more
Mhm.
essential than movement. And that's where it's like being in the stillness, and that's where like trust happens for me. And it's a physical thing to know that my body breathes. It's been breathing while we talk without me noticing. For the
Yeah.
listeners, the body has been breathing, the chair has been supporting, the air is pure and healthy enough to breathe. And so there is this basic trust that happens when we can sort of sink
Yeah.
into what is in the being sense, that I think and it demands silence and stillness, and interior silence and stillness, in a sense, to kind of touch that basic trust. Meet Ali H. Almas, in his
Mhm.
book, the what's my
Is it
my
facets or
very
keys? It's
facets of
facets of
unity. Like,
unity or keys to the Enneagram. You got two good
yeah,
ones.
it's dynamite, and his teaching on basic trust in there. It's just
Mm.
like, is the universe fundamentally trustworthy or is it not? Einstein asked the same question:
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
universe a friendly place or is it not?
Mm.
And we arrive at, yes, it is. Just like the sky appears to be madness with the storm, but then it remains uninjured after the storm passes. And so
Yeah.
I think that's what that sort of trust that I sink into when it's just like bare naked being of the body and stillness and prayer and meditation,
Hmm.
uh, that I don't really get always with mental or emotional
Yeah.
orientations or even movement.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's beautiful. I think there is something really important to this trust piece. And I want to go out on a limb and say that I think that this kind of trust, it does find its foundation in the body, right? You can do all sorts of mental gymnastics without this trust. You can have all sorts of feelings, even really wonderful feelings, emotions, or whatever, without this trust piece. But I don't think you can show up to your life fully without it. And I do think it lives here in the body, right? The body is so much about our beingness and our existence and our boundaries, right?
mhm,
And like, the body types dealing mostly with anger, right? Anger is this very legitimate response to our boundaries being violated.
mhm,
And we can choose to focus on that. And I think most of us do, especially if we live in the body center. But something unlocks when we can hold these ways that we've been violated, these ways that our boundaries have been crossed, and tap into this trust that really starts to transform something. And I know you said like, do we have this fundamental trust? Like, is the universe good or bad? And I think the head center sees that and says, well, let me gather the data
mhm,
and I'll find out. And that's not how this question is supposed to work. Right? When we talk about from like a yogic background, from a yogic philosophy, if we are only seeing bad omens, we're out of balance, right?
mhm,
Arjuna on the floor of his chariot is saying, "Oh, I can't do this because everything looks bad. Nothing's going to end well." And Krishna is like, "Dude, stand up. take action.
Mm.
You know, a lot of the work of the 12 steps is we learn by doing, right? And we don't find out or discover or like, we're not testing the universe to see if it's good or bad. We choose which universe we want to live in. And that's going to greatly affect what we see and how we respond to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, can we choose to believe that the universe is ultimately trustworthy, that the universe is ultimately beneficent, and still see all the things that are happening in this world? Can we have a view large enough for that? And if we can, then what's available to us? How can we show up differently?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where this showing up really changes things.
Yeah, and for me, it feels like stepping into it, like you're saying, something greater than us. Like I'm stepping into a field that's larger
Mm,
than myself. Like
yeah,
trust is something I can like try to convince myself to believe or something,
yeah,
or is trust a sort of current that I can just sort of like surrender to if I'm quiet and still and the busyness of my mind, my thinking, feeling, doing self can quiet down enough to feel this sort of pulsing energy through me. And that's what the practice does. And so I don't know if I want to like, can I convince myself to believe it? I don't want to believe it. I want to just experience it and then show up in a
mm,
world that says, I trust the nature of reality
yeah,
in spite of evidence that surrounds me saying otherwise, because I know it as a field of energy that pulses in my being. And
mm,
I don't know how to get there other than practice. And it doesn't
yeah,
mean it's like this in a state of permanent state of like perfect trust, but I do know it feels like an energy force beyond me, within
yeah,
me, that I am in, that I can't convince myself to do. And like you said, if the head types try to make sense of it, good luck. I mean, it's
yeah. And it's not just the head types, right? It's
I,
all of us. We all have head centers, and we're all doing kind of the same thing, in that way. But listening to what you're saying, it's kind of landed for me that like trust is not a thought.
Mhm.
Trust is not even a feeling. We only know trust through our actions, right? You can think that you trust something, but until you take that step in faith, right? That like until you show up to it, it's just an idea, right? Like you said in the earlier part of the conversation, right? It's the apple in your mind, which is completely different than taking a bite of an apple.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the piece that we all have to remember, that like the trust it's an action. It is a step, right? And sometimes that means being like what that step is, I think is different for everyone, right? Like for me, it's trusting that I can be still, right? That I can, even like you've said, step back. I don't mind the limelight. I am an
Mhm.
extrovert. I like people. Can I take a step back? Can I trust that things are going to be okay if things are different? And for a 9, right, showing up, can you trust enough to show up? I don't know. That just feels like it for me right now. Like that is some stuff.
Mhm. 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 And it's inner work, and it is,
Mm,
so it's so interesting that it's action oriented, like you're saying, and it's so inward for me in a sense. But I love how you're saying like you secretly don't trust it until you do.
yeah.
In a sense. And if we all did, and we all leaned into that trust that the nature of reality is ultimately good, and that the universe is ultimately loving, and that God isn't actually an angry guy in the sky damning us to hell, if we could all trust that, this world would be at peace. I mean,
Mm,
if all 8 billion people had that sort of trust that it would be okay,
yeah.
then we wouldn't have the sort of backstabbing that we have. And so it's an inward process. So this is where it's like that personal transformation work
Yeah.
is social transformation. It
Absolutely.
does feel like it happens on the individual level, and we still need the folks in the streets, and we need to do that. But there's also like a legitimate social society based transformation that happens when enough
Mm-hmm.
people do this work. So
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to touch in, for the last little bit and kind of, I'd love to know a little bit more about how did you, how did you come across the Enneagram? Like, what was your experience like finding this tool, discovering that you were a 9? Tell us a little bit more about that journey.
yeah, it was an enlightening journey, to say the least. I learned it in the context of living in an intentional community that my partner and I started. We lived there for 4 years with 9 wonderful, crazy people. And so I learned about it in the context of community. Like we were all
Mm.
reading the wisdom of the Enneagram together, and at one point drinking a little bit too much wine and talking about each other to each other. And but it was also a spiritual tool. It was my spiritual director that handed me the wisdom of the Enneagram. I took it on a bus tour to a protest on a like 3 hour bus ride, and read the wisdom of the Enneagram on this bus full of crazy with just a bunch of people, and took the tests. And no, I'm not a 5. No, I'm not a 1. No, I'm not a 7. Then all of a sudden, the list of 9s, it was like yes, 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 mostly yes, 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 and it was like, oh, okay, like somebody gets me.
Yo.
So it was so great because it was just so like, okay, this is real. And it was used in the context of spiritual direction, which wasn't just like build my ego, how do I
Yeah.
strengthen my strengths and strengthen my weaknesses and become a better version, but it was about that sort of inner transformation. What does it mean to go beyond my personality, beyond myself? How does my personality shift or change the way I see God,
Mm.
or how I
Yeah.
view what a relationship should look like? And so it was always a spiritual tool, and it was always in the or at the start was always in the
Yeah.
context of unity. So like we were reading the book together,
Yeah.
we were dealing with each other, because we were dealing with each other a lot. 9 people in a house with, one kitchen, one bathroom, and so it was relational, and it was a
Yeah.
tool that was so enlightening there. And so that's how it started, and it's certainly been a tool that I sticks with me. There's seasons where I'm like, don't touch it, I don't read a book, and then there's
Yeah.
seasons where it's like, oh yeah, oh my god, like this helps so much.
Yeah. I think I do think there is something really profound, and I've been noticing this pattern as I ask this question of different people. That like it seems to me that the people who really allow this system and the insight that it offers to change them are often those who stumble upon it in kind of its best case scenario, right? Like you talked about, it was always a spiritual tool, and it was always talked about, or like it was foundational for you in community. And
Mhm.
these are the aspects that, again, I think completely transform what this tool is for people. You go on the internet and there's like a million quizzes and Instagram accounts with funny
Mhm.
memes and all that. And not that any of that is necessarily bad, but the way that you relate to it in those spaces is different. And I
Mhm.
think that it that the those containers are deeply limiting to what this tool has to offer. Eh, I similarly, stumbled into the Enneagram in a space where it was heavily involved in my community and
Mhm.
always spiritual, and it was also in a big part of like how I was stepping into my yoga practice and my contemplative
Mhm.
practice and discovering this philosophy and all of these things. So for me it was always very like knitted together. And then I talked to other people who found it in different ways, and they're like, "Oh, that's a fun, like parlor
Mhm.
trick, whatever." And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like
Yeah.
it's landed for you in a way that's clearly made a really massive impact.
Yeah, and I think that's so. I mean, it's so true because we are flooded with it as just like the personality typing system, which to me just covers like the psychological self, which is one dimension of a much greater part of our being. And so I think we just need like that's why I love the wisdom of the Enneagram as a starting text because it does
Yeah.
talk about ego and essence, personality and
Mhm.
spirituality. And so it's so enlightening to see it as like it's psychological self, it's a spiritual self, it's a somatic self, it's our three centers of intelligence. And it's not just the personality typing system
Yeah.
that's like so poppy now and still useful and still a
Yeah.
tool. But for those people that are stuck there, it's just like, maybe we, like, how do we point them to the circle? Like,
Yeah.
forget about the zigzags, forget about the type, like, just what is the law of one, and how does that, why does it matter? What is God? What is the circle? What is this union that's secretly
Yeah.
holding the chaos in place? And so, yeah, I think I love how you lift up the community aspect too. And I know you're doing the conscious Enneagram too. And because it's like, it's not just for personal
Yeah.
work. And so much of our inner work is personal and it's totally necessary, but it has to be relational, familial, our
Yeah.
families, it has to be society. So it just is layers. And if we let it flow, it'll
Yeah.
fill that space. So,
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and I just, I see it playing out in, like what you're doing with Closer Than Breath. And where you're bringing it in these other spaces, like the Enneagram isn't necessarily the main focus of the things that you do, but it's such a supportive tool right in those spaces. And I'm just like, and I'm sitting here thinking like, man, I feel so grateful to know so many people in this community who are making it easier and easier for people to stumble into the Enneagram in the best case scenario.
mhm.
And I think what you're doing with these, like you said, the organization that wasn't going to be an organization, like that's what it's allowing people to do, is to find this tool in the context where it will be the most supportive and most impactful.
Amen. Honored to hear you say that, and a prayer that it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Keith, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. How can my listeners get in touch with you? How can they find out more about your work?
Yeah, I would just direct folks to closerthanbreath.com. We got loads of things, Enneagram courses, contemplative Enneagram offerings. We send out a weekly, my friend Logan Jones, a colleague in Closer Than Breath, he and I sort of swap each week and write a contemplative Enneagram email. So you can sign up for that on closerthanbreath.com. And every Wednesday, it's an Enneagram email about contemplation, integrating it with the spiritual and psychological. And so that's a fun resource that we're doing. And I'm on Instagram at my first name and last name, although I've taken a hiatus, but we'll
Okay.
be back on there very soon.
Okay. Sounds good. Maybe by the time this comes out, you'll be back showing up to Instagram.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a complicated place to show up. I'll say that much. Keith, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor sitting and chatting with you and hearing more about your story. Thank you.
Likewise, Abby, thank you. Appreciate you.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another incredible conversation. Again, it was such a joy getting to sit with Keith and just hear about his life and experience and what he's doing in the world. Definitely check out Closer Than Breath. I've put links to all of Keith's work down in the description below, so don't miss out on that. As a reminder, the Enneagram Expedition registration closes on December 18th. That's just a couple weeks from today when this episode is coming out. So be sure and check out the link down below for all the information. I would love to see you in this cohort. This is the kind of space that really does change lives. So if you're interested in making 2026 your year, click the link down below and sign up today. And finally, if you haven't already, don't forget to leave a rating and a review in your podcast app. Click subscribe on all those different things and take a moment and share this episode with a 9 friend of yours, because you know that you have a 9 friend and they probably need to hear this. So send it like right now. Press pause, click that little arrow button and send this to your friend. Okay. Did you do it? Okay, cool. Until next time, don't forget to breathe.